Yeah. We're going to continue the Bhagavatam. Murali Gopal yesterday spoke very well on Krishna's kindness and the leading up to today's adventure with Sudama Brahmana. And we are going to do a little poll. And do I have access to do a poll? Is that something that I don't see?
Yes, you're now a co-host. You should be able to do a poll.
Uh, let's see. Um, let's see if I see that here. No, I don't see. Maybe whoever managing it can adjust the settings so I can do a poll.
Hmm.
If I can't, I can't. But we'd like to make things a little exciting.
No polls. Hmm. No polls or quizzes to launch. Create a new poll or quiz from your web portal. Let's see what it does. Okay. Um, what's the question?
Well, I'll type it in
Okay.
if there is a poll.
Hold on.
If not, I will just ask it a different way.
Okay,
Uh,
let me see if I can pull that off.
yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, we'll continue. Um, uh, so, oh my God, Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Iti Mustim Sakraji Jag Adva Divityam Jagadum Adade Tavak Chir Jagare Hastam Tarahat Para Parameshtina. After saying this, the Supreme Lord ate one palmful and was about to eat a second when the devoted goddess Rukmini, his principal wife, took hold of his hand. And here's the purport uh, by Ridanand Raj and Gopi Pranadana. Queen Rukmini took hold of Krishna's hand to prevent him from eating any more of the flat rice. According to Sripad Sridhar Swami, with this gesture, she meant to tell the Lord, this much of your grace is sufficient to assure anyone vast riches, which are merely the play of my glance. Being the goddess of fortune, she can say that. But please do not force me to surrender myself to this Brahmin, as will happen if you eat one more handful. Now, what does that mean? So Vishwanath Chakravarti uh, goes into some detail. He explains that by taking hold of the Lord's hand, Rukmini implied, first, if you eat all of this wonderful treat your friend brought from his house, what will I have left from my friends, co-wives, servants, and myself? There will not be enough left to distribute even one grain to each of us. And to her maidservant companion, she said by her gesture, this hard rice will upset my lord's tender stomach. Now, I don't know if any of you have had flat rice or chipped rice. Um, when there's bags of rice, on the bottom, there's left rice grains that are kind of partial grains, very hard, almost impossible to cook. They're not very edible. And Sudama's wife had nothing. That was one of those days she went hungry. She begged from some Brahmin neighbors some chip rice so that Sudama didn't go empty-handed. Of course, Sudama never told Krishna about it because he was too embarrassed to even give the Lord chip rice. Plus, even though he was sent by his wife to please beg something so we can eat, he never did that. And we're going to discuss that in a little more detail in a moment. Meanwhile, Srila Prabhupada comments that when food is offered to Lord Krishna with love and devotion, he is pleased and accepts it from his devotee. Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, became so obliged to the devotee that she has to personally go to the devotee's home to turn it into the most opulent home in the world. If one feeds Narayan sumptuously, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, automatically becomes a guest in one's house, which means that one's home becomes opulent. Now, for an interesting side bit here. First, I think I can get the poll to work if I log in, which I'm doing. Okay. I went to India when I was 22 years old to be a teacher. You're probably mostly familiar with my story. And my purpose of going was to try to understand the Gita. Now, curiously, the 60s were an odd time, and the early 70s. There were a lot of, after Prabhupada came, a lot of gurus came to America. And it was like the joke of the New York Daily News. Every week they'd show one centerfold of some guru coming, and they were coming basically for money. And it was one guy, 14-year-old. He spoke the Gita very well. I heard him speak. And then at the end, he says, so once you surrender to Krishna, and I am Krishna. Then you had the infamous Rajneesh, who had 60 Rolls Royces. So these things were going on. At the same time, the Maha Mantra I found very attractive. And then even more interesting, more interesting to me were the Krishna devotees. I couldn't figure out if they were exhibitionists or renounced. Anyone going around with a green sock, a blue sock, and a bed sheet either had to be an extreme exhibitionist, which we had a lot of in the Greenwich Village in those days, or totally renounced from the world. And I decided the only way I'm going to fulfill my understanding is to go to the source of it, to India. And I was fortunate to get an opportunity to go to India from the inside out, as a teacher trained in Hindi and etc. And when I was there, I started going and visiting temples, even mosques and churches, and asking one question: why are you here? Turns out the reason they were there is very similar to the reason most of us will use Amazon.com. Now, how does Amazon.com work? You give them a credit card, and the next day you get a package. It's quite amazing how that system works. And that's what it was like at the churches, temples, mosques in India. Whenever I visit and I say, why are you here? I want money, I want dowry, I want this. So it was a deal. You offer prayers, and in turn, you get your material facility. It was a business deal. And I said, my God, I went halfway around the world, got to experience the joys of what we used to call then Delhi belly. All of this, and it's the same garbage I left America for. Just not some great realizations, but just wanting something. So Sudama was sent by his wife to get something, but all he really wanted was devotion. He was also devoted to his wife. She said, go see your friend Krishna. And he thought two things. One, I really don't want to ask Krishna for anything, but I would like to see Krishna, so I'll go. And his wife gave him that little gift, but he kept it hidden. But of course, Krishna, being the super soul, knew it was there. Now, there is a mood of, should we ask for something from God, or we should offer something to God? One great American captured this mood in January 1961. Does anybody know which great American captured this mood? January 1961 in a very
John
famous...
F. Kennedy Jr. John F. Kennedy.
Yes, John.
Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I'm going to play it for you. We shall play that, his famous words, which were quite well done.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
So, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow...
So it was a very famous, brilliant statement at the time. Who here, and some of you, if you don't mind, and you're not in your underwear, turn on your camera so I can see you. It's nice to see who I'm speaking to. I realize for some people it's not practical, but I like to see the audience. One of the advantages of Zoom is I don't have to travel to give a class. The disadvantage is I can't see who I'm speaking to. So those who are not in their underwear and PJs, put your camera on if it's practical. Thank you. So, very famous statement, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And those words really captured America at the time. It captured me. I was 12 years old. I thought, that's cool. This is the mood herein. Ask not what God can do for us, what we can do for God. But there is a gospel that says the opposite. It's called the prosperity gospel. Have anybody here heard of the prosperity gospel? It's quite the gospel. The prosperity gospel, many churches will advocate it, will say that, let's see, we're going to get to, so I'm going to give you an example of that in a moment, that if you pray to God, God will give you everything you want. There's a verse in the New Testament, Mark, which is misinterpreted, misconstrued, and taken out of context. And they always quote that, and you give to God, God will give you whatever you want. In the context, it means something different, but it's always quoted. So we will try this now. We'll show you this. This is be a little entertaining.
You're missing it, and your family's suffering by it. That's a word. As surely as I'm speaking by the Spirit of God, that is a word for a person right now. That is God penetrating your heart. It's burning on the inside of you, and you need to make a vow of faith of $1,000. Oh, Bob, couldn't you say 25? No! You can't make a $1,000 vow of faith. I'm saying in faith. So we got people that don't have, teenagers that have hardly nothing going for them. They got enough faith to make a $1,000 vow and send them $5 here and $10 there as God begins to move like a whirlwind in their lives. Because they don't have that old programming of religion. Well, this isn't the way we do it in my church. Forget your church. I'm talking about what God says. And if you want the kind of miracles that are in the Bible, you're going to have to do what God said to do. And I've got the faith to believe they'll come to pass. This is hot soil for anyone that's got the faith to sow into it right now. I mean right now. I mean right now, not tomorrow. That's part of your problem. God's already spoken a word to you and told you to do it. You need to do it right now. And it's right now is your time to sow. I mean, to get your faith out there. Yes, it takes faith to make a $1,000 vow. Yes, and you're going to pay it because it's to God. But he's going to give you seed to sow. He's going to give you finances supernaturally. Your step of faith is going to break the devil that's held you in doubt and unbelief and held back the blessings of God because you didn't have the faith to go forward. But this gives you the faith. When you sow, faith comes, expectancy comes, your eyes open, and that treasure that's been hid, there it is. I see it now. Why? Because you got your eyes off the scene. Because you need to get your...
Okay, enough of that. I didn't want to take a chance of converting any of you. But that's the infamous Bob Tillman. He's still on. If anybody wants to have some entertainment, a minister did a version of him with an added soundtrack called Pastor Gas. You can Google it. I'm not going to undignify a Bhagavatam class with it, but it's quite funny. And he fell down in some scandal, but he came back again and again. And he's like one of the worst, but there's many out there with this prosperity gospel. And the prosperity gospel says that you're sinful and you're fallen. But if you give money to God through somebody like this creep or some other creep like that, if you give money, then God will give you. And then in the show, they always show someone, I've seen it a few times, where somebody is dirt poor, they give the last $1,000 they have, and the next thing you know, they have a new Cadillac. And he's infamous for doing these kind of matters. Now, so the question I'm asking you, how is that different than Sudama Brahman's wife sending him to see Krishna to ask for something? So the poll I was going to give you is asking 4 questions. Let me see. Do I have a poll? Let's see if I have one. Do I have access to a poll? Nope. This is not configured, this version, for a poll.
If I go to the menu down below and I scroll all the way to the right and then I see more, I click on more and poll is the second from the top.
It says captions in mine. Transcript, captions, docs.
It sounds like his version isn't updated, Ananda Bihari, to be able to.
Yeah, captions, whiteboards, notes, apps, and then more.
More. Whiteboard. That doesn't. I don't. Maybe because I'm not I am a host. Don't worry about it. Here's what the poll I was going to ask. It's not that important. There are 4 reasons why somebody becomes, 4 kinds of people approach Krishna. This is from the Bhagavad Gita. Somebody help me with what the 4 are. Yes, we'll get a little participation here. You can put it in the chat. You can shout it out. What are the 4 reasons people approach Krishna?
The distressed, the curious, the distressed, the curious,
the
faithful,
I didn't hear.
The faithful, the ones that really want devotion.
Okay.
And those that want jnanic kind of knowledge.
Yeah. I think that's similar. One is people who have distress. Another is people who want something material. And then people who are curious. And finally, the most rare, those who are wise. The poll I was going to ask all you to fill in anonymously is which of the 4 reasons was your primary motivation to approach Krishna? So that's what I was going to ask in the poll. But we can't, and it would be an anonymous. We would just see how many said this and how many said that. So I was, excuse the pun, curious about that myself. Okay. But remember, all 4 reasons Krishna said are pious. So I asked Prabhupada this question: if a somebody is very poor and they're approaching Krishna for wealth. Is there something wrong with that? And because I'd been in India and I was so disappointed that it was the same thing as America. Yeah, you approach God like this crazy reverend you were watching, and they're just asking for something in return. I said, that's just not enough. So I asked Prabhupada that. His answer was curious. What would his, and I said, well, people are approaching God for money. There's something wrong with this. Anybody tell me what Prabhupada answered? It's curious. Wasn't what I expected.
That you have to take care of your basic needs in order to be on a platform for devotion.
He could have said that. That would have made sense. That's not what he said. But what you said made sense. My question, this is not very good. People are just approaching, I want money or I want my material needs met. This is not very pious. And what did Prabhupada say? Think about it a minute. Leela.
Did he say something along the lines of at least they're approaching him?
Yes. Anybody who approaches Krishna is doing something pious. So that's good. It's not pure piety. It's not Suddha Sattva. It's not the best of goodness, but at least approaching God is better than not approaching God. So even approaching God for money, not the way Reverend Tillman does, because he's just stealing money from people. In fact, he got caught and there was a scandal over it, blah, blah, blah. We won't go into that. But if you have needs and you approach God, that's okay. It's just not the best. Sudama Brahman did not ask God for anything. His mood was, to paraphrase Kennedy, not ask what God can do for me, ask what I can do for God. So that is the mood that is being conveyed herein, and that's the higher mood. It doesn't mean that God won't meet our needs, but we don't really know what our needs are. We really don't know what ultimately is best. I mean, we're all thinking, well, if I had this, if I had that. And Krishna never gives us more than we can handle, though it sure feels like that at times. It sure does. But in my half a century of devotional service, I can say in my own life and all the many lives I observe, Krishna never gives us more than we can handle, even if it feels like that. Now, so this is some of what's going on with Sudama Brahman. He is approaching Krishna, but remember, he never actually asked Krishna for anything, and he was given this great opulence. Now, if I was given that great opulence, many palaces, all kinds of beautiful servants surrounding me, and luxurious clothes, there's a reason why Krishna doesn't give that to me. I'm not Sudama Brahman. I wouldn't use it so well. It might go to my head. It might be problematic. In Sudama Brahman, it was no problem at all. One of my friends has been given every opulence, material opulence, and that's Ambarish, Henry Ford's great-grandson. And we've had some very good conversations about this. He grew up with his mother training him, no one will ever love you. All they want is your money. Then he met Prabhupada, who did love him, and just told him how to use his money in Krishna's service. Didn't really ask for the money, just how to use it in service. And that totally captured him. But he says his opulence is also can be a curse. It can be difficult to handle. It makes life difficult. There's a story about New Raman Reti that I want to share with you. Many of you have been to New Raman Reti. We have that beautiful temple. That temple was designed and built by the late Param Brahma. Param Brahma was a very nice, sweet devotee who, after he built the temple, and he was told by other devotees, don't build it There's the Brigu doesn't think it's a good time, blah, blah, blah. Different superstitions were coming in and out. He said Krishna needs a temple. The deities were living on literally an unpermitted porch on a mobile home with illegal electrical connections. It wasn't sustainable. He says we need a temple, designed it and built it personally. And then after he built it, he said, now I'm going to take a week off. I've worked so hard and I want to get my spiritual life reconnected. And he just chanted and read all day. And then a week later, one night, he went to bed, went to lie down with his hand still in his japa beads. And when his wife came in the morning, his hand was still in his japa beads, but he breathed no more. And here was someone who said, I want to do this for Krishna. And then Krishna took him back. It was quite a touching story. So Sudama Brahma Semu, what can I do for Krishna? And Krishna will take care of us. As Murli Gopal was talking yesterday, Krishna is kind. One very dear devotee friend of mine, senior man, his wife died a most tragic death. I don't need to go into details, but very, very tragic death. Sometimes some deaths are more tragic than others, the way it happens. Kind of sudden and shocking. I'm sure some of you have had that sad experience. So we're very close. As soon as I heard this, I called him up. And I said, Prabhu, my heart is breaking. What happened? And the first words out of his mouth shocked me to my core, to my utter core, and they still shock me. This devotee, extremely Krishna conscious. And the first words out of his mouth were, Krishna is kind. Even though it's tragic, so many tears, so much pain, he understood deeply that under the big, big picture, Krishna was being kind, and it turns out it was the truth in every regard. So the idea of Krishna being kind is a very important theme in this chapter. But Krishna's kindness may manifest in giving us what we want, because that's what we need, but will always manifest in Krishna giving us what we need, which may not be what we externally want. Sudama Brahman did not want any opulence. And because he was so detached from it, when Krishna gave him the opulence, it didn't change his devotion one bit, but it made his wife happy. Because all of us who are grahastas know the secret of grahasta life is happy wife, happy life. So we all learn that lesson sooner or sometimes later. So Sudama was thinking the same way, an extremely devoted wife. She would actually not eat to make sure her husband ate. She was so devoted in every regard. In the Shishtastikam prayers from the Anjalila of the CC, there is this one famous story. I'll read it to you, just one moment. And this story is an odd one, and sometimes it can be a little difficult to hear this. But in it, and this is CC chapter 20, the Shishtastikam prayers, verse 57. The wife of a Brahmana suffering from leprosy manifested herself as the topmost of all chaste women by serving a prostitute to satisfy her husband. Thus she stopped the movement of the sun, brought her dead husband back to life, and satisfied the demigods. And when I read that, I was kind of shocked. I mean, that goes against my moral compass. It goes against what I feel is right. And At the same time, what she did set the devotional mood. And she said, what can I do for my husband, even if it was a little odd? She was thinking selflessly. He needed some intimate companionship. I have leprosy. I'm out of there. I'll hire someone. And for that selfless devotion, she was given great blessings. I'm not sure her husband got the same blessings for the way he behaved. That's not discussed here, but I think we can safely assume that. But she did. Again, that mood, ask not what Krishna can do for us, ask what we can do for Krishna. So being 13 minutes for the end of the class, I will follow my good instructions from Ananda and pause here for questions, comments, or I can play a little more of Reverend Tilton if that's what you really need to hear. Any questions or comments?
Man, my wife walked in while the preacher, the prosperity guy, was speaking, and she's like, "Who's this? Who's giving class today? Is it Bhima?" It's a joke. It's a joke, Bhima Prabhu. Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful class, Brahmatirtha Prabhu.
Well,
I want my $1,000 back. That's the big thing.
Exactly.
Everything I've ever lost.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not kidding on that reverend. I mean, I was going through different prosperity reverends, and I decided he's the most dramatic and the worst of it. He's famous for his faces. And again, there is a video I mentioned you could watch if you want to be hysterical. It's just not appropriate for a Bhagavatam class. But somebody added a soundtrack when he made his faces, and it's quite hilarious because, and he's still on TV. First, he was going for poor white folks, and then he decided to go for poor black folks. And he changed his whole pitch. And he's just there's a bunch of them like that. There's some of them are much more famous and considered more mainstream, but it's still it's not devotion. And we can say, well, they're approaching Krishna. It's one of the reasons they want some material wealth or some piety. That can be true if they weren't one of them had a private jet, but he wanted a bigger one. So he said, I want all of you to donate 60 million so I can get a better jet so I can spread the gospel. And people who give to him, that is not the category of approaching God for in some pious way. Basically, it's a scam artist. And we have to know better. But they're very popular. Prosperity gospel. It's got a little less popular nowadays because so many of the preachers who advocated it got caught in a scandal. There was one in New Orleans who got caught in a scandal at Baton Rouge. He got caught in a major scandal with a woman, and the guy who called them out on it, his competing reverend televangelists that competed for the same audience. When this came, he blasted all over the internet, look what happened, Reverend so-and-so so fallen. So Reverend so-and-so was not stupid. He hired a detective to follow the other reverend around. Sure enough, caught him in the bed of a prostitute too. And we had the same story with Prabhupada. One time Prabhupada was visiting with, I think it was Cardinal Danilou, and he was arguing with him about meat eating. And Cardinal Danilou wouldn't concede one bit on that. No, we can eat meat. The animal, God gave us dominion over the animals, blah, blah, blah. He couldn't concede anything about the cruelty of it. And a few weeks later, he was dead, unfortunately, in the bed of a prostitute. So these things do go on. Bhima Prabhu, you always make a contribution that helps, so go for it.
Well, one thing, thank you, Prabhu. I love how you open everything up to the here and the now, what we can apply to our own lives, because obviously even devotees will find themselves a little bit unnerved by financial circumstances when Krishna takes us to that edge. As a devotee who's been around, been out, been back, and everything, someone who's owned his own business and now owns two businesses, et cetera, I've paid a key just due to the fact that I've been in the vicinity of the philosophy. Not that I know it, but that I understand what Krishna is telling us. And I'll just tell you that we should all get ready that that when Krishna brings us to a point of seeming poverty, seeming external poverty, it's a blessing. It's really a blessing, because that's the only time myself, when I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would do upon opening my eyes was to roll over and put my head on the ground and pray to Krishna, not to give me stuff, but to get me to the other side of the anxiety I was feeling. Just whatever it is you're teaching me here, get me to the other side. And of course, this is a lesson that the lessons that I was taught during this time were lessons I never would have learned unless I was brought to that edge. We need to, I'm just learning this, to embrace when Krishna takes from us, because he is Hari and he does take from us. And if we have any attachment to material opulence of any type, he will, by his mercy and grace, kind of like reach his hand in and take it from you. And if you complain about it, he'll go into your temple room and pee all over the floor. So you don't have a chance against Krishna. He will do what's necessary to expedite our purification. And part of that is the purification to know that at any moment you can lose everything. At any moment. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And I was so inspired about having a good time, I took myself to the beach. No, thanks, Biba. That helps. Any other comments or questions? Anybody else have something to add? I see many of my friends here, Leela and Henry and others. Any particular comments or questions? Leela.
Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Just a comment that, I was often thinking about how trying to escape the anxiety of this insecure world seems like a no can do. And then also starting to reframe or understand what is actual wealth. What does it mean for me to have wealth? Does it mean that I have, this much money or this property or that thing? And then we start to sort of put that into a different perspective. Is my wealth having some free time, or having devotees around me, or having healthy food, or even just having a roof over my head? It starts to I guess the focus on what I do have starts to diminish some of that anxiety of what I think I don't have that I think I need. And so it's an interesting practice if we redefine what wealth is. I mean, but in this case, he was actually hungry. He didn't have food. But so often I don't even realize, the wealth of I can go get some organic fruits or some organic vegetables. And then in the same, minute think, oh, what's wrong with my life? I don't have this, I don't have that. And so it's a very interesting dichotomy, I guess.
It is, and you put that very well. When Prabhupada talks about one situation he observed, and when I lived in India, I observed it. There was a group in Bengal area called the Naxalites, and they were communist terrorists. And at that time, the government of Bengal was an elected communist government, but far to the left of the left-wing communists were the Naxalites. They were basically wanted to take down the government. And when in my Peace Corps days, I was warned, do not go into that part, a certain neighborhood in Calcutta, because they'll kidnap a foreigner. Of course, being 22 and stupid, the first thing I did was go into that neighborhood and check it out, but that's a different matter. And when I would take the overnight train to Calcutta, an electric train, half the time we'd have to be rescued by a diesel engine because the Naxalites were stealing the copper wire and then melting the copper and reselling it to finance their nefarious activities. Now, here's what they did, and Prabhupada saw this and noted it, and I also observed it. They would go to the less educated electorate, and they would say, you're going to the church asking for your daily bread, or going to the temple asking God to give you whatever. Ask us, and we'll give you your bread. We'll give you what you need. And they would give out food or resources and say, so why worship God? Worship us. We'll take care of it. That was truly their line. Prabhupada talks about it. I personally witnessed it, and it was kind of scary. And for uneducated people, they fall for it. Now, let's take this audience we're with now. We're more educated, but we also can fall for it, where we think that, oh, I'll just approach God and get what I need. You actually will get what you need, but what you really need, you'll get. And it may or may not be what you want. But there's a saying, when God likes you, he gives you what you need. When God loves you, he takes everything. So Krishna will take care of us, 100% guaranteed. Sometimes it takes a lot of insight to see it. One of the purposes of studying this chapter, and I want to conclude with one item, I have that bookmarked. One of the purposes of this chapter is to give us that faith. And this chapter ends with what they call I forgot the Sanskrit, but the verses that give the blessing at the end of each chapter. So here's the final verse in this chapter. It's very important for you. I will read it. The Lord always shows Brahmins special favor. Anyone who hears this account of the Supreme Lord's kindness to Brahmanas will come to develop love for the Lord and thus become free from the bondage of material work. And so here again, I'm going to read that one more time. Anyone who hears this account, which you all have just heard, so you're all in this category now, of the Supreme Lord's kindness to the Brahmanas, will come to develop love for the Lord and thus be free from the bondage of material work. So by hearing this chapter, you have purified your heart. You have set yourself up where you now have the choice to ask not what God can do for me, what I can do for God, and receive all the blessings of Sudamana Brahma. And the real blessings was not his material wealth. Clearly, it was his devotion to be with Krishna. With that, we'll conclude here. We have 1 minute. If there's a final question or comment, Adi always has a good comment to add. Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So some people say money is the root of all evil, but our understanding is that it's not in and of itself evil, although we have to be careful with it. But if it's used appropriately in Krishna's service, great or small amount of Lakshmi, because Lakshmi is a person, and she loves to run and jump into Krishna's arms. So if we please Krishna, and we're not looking for our own pleasure, when we see Krishna pleased, it's a byproduct, then we will be pleased. And the Hasidic Jewish people say, who is a wealthy person? One who is satisfied with whatever the Lord gives him. So that's our real wealth, and it must be used properly. Verse Srila Prabhupada, Lakshmi loves to run and jump in Krishna's arms.
Very well put. Thanks, Adi. I always like your concluding comment. Okay, with that, stop here. Thank you so much. Blessed day. Hare Krishna.
Thank Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Darshan time, please. Cameras on if you can. Pajamas, no pajamas. Makeup, no makeup. No problem. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Arjuna Prabhu. Okay, Adipusha Prabhu. So we are going to proceed with the afterglow. Realizations, reflections, please. Leela Devidasi, wonderful question, very pertinent, intelligent. Nice seeing you. Hare Krishna. Okay. Isaiah, what's your takeaway? Any takeaways, Isaiah? You're a very handsome young man, Isaiah. Shy. Okay, Isaiah Prabhu, can you chant Hare Krishna then? Yeah. Annabelle, unmute him. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, family. All right. So we love you. Thank you, dear devotees, for your association. Happy Monday. Krishna is in your heart. Krishna is our best friend. And we can please him by cooperating nicely with each other, loving each other, showing other people that Krishna loves them. And then Lakshmi will jump when we are worthy. I was once in the car with Adipusha Prabhu, and we were driving by this fancy hotel. And I told him, Adipusha Prabhu, why did Krishna give us this, dilapidated building to work with? Meanwhile, these karmic people have this wonderful hotel, fancy building. And Adi told me that when we are ready, Krishna will give us a better facility when we are prepared. So it's all up to us. When we are qualified and prepared, Krishna will give us facility to play with, to engage in service. And in the meantime, 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, Japa Kirtan class, Prashanam, association, cooperation, books. And then everything will be taken care of. Right, Leela Devidasi? Are you smiling in approval? Okay, or what a fool.